Hello, everyone. Tonight we dim the lights and drift into a Venice that still shimmers on the water, even when the candles are out. You step into a room of masks and music, where perfume hangs like a second skin and laughter bubbles up from silver cups. The floor creaks faintly under brocade and slippered feet. Somewhere a lute plucks a soft pattern that insists you slow down, let your shoulders drop, and let the city change your breathing. Do not worry. There is no exam on Venetian etiquette at the end. You simply arrive, and you listen. You move through velvet curtains into a chamber the color of dusk. Candles breathe along the walls. The air tastes of honeyed wine, orange peel, and clove. A dish passes by with little sugar sculptures shaped like boats, ridiculous and perfect, as if dessert decided to learn to float. A woman in a pearl net, draped over her hair, leans toward a magistrate whose ring could blind the moon. She does not lower her eyes. She speaks, and the magistrate tilts his head as if the entire canal system has just shifted course. You are not here for scandal. You are here to pay attention. Listen to the music again. It is not only notes, it is a map. Every pause marks a street. Every tremble marks a door. Behind one door, a girl warms her hands over a brazier while she practices the poem she will recite later. Behind another, a tailor stitches whalebone into a bodice and prays that the sumptuary inspectors do not visit today. Across the city, the council that issues laws on clothing and colors sharpens its pen. Venice likes rules. Venice also likes exceptions. You are about to meet the experts in living at the crossroads of both. You brush against a woman's sleeve and feel satin cool as evening water. She smiles without apology. Her eyes carry the curiosity of someone who reads everything and misses nothing. Courtesan. The word tastes different than it looks. It is not a category you can keep tidy. In this world, courtesans are hired for conversation, for company, for poetry and songs, for the shapely choreography of influence. They know which wine softens which temper, which argument defeats which policy, which rumor travels faster than a courier. They do not bow to the room quietly bows to them. A small silver box opens near you. Inside are pastilles, little aromatic lozenges pressed from sugar and powdered ambergris, meant to sweeten a breath before a verse, or a kiss, or a negotiation that pretends not to be a negotiation. One melts on your tongue. It tastes like winter learning to be spring. A harmless indulgence, yes, and also a tool. The city is a theater of details, and the quiet tools matter. You begin to understand that an evening can be a treaty, that a compliment can be an instrument, that in Venice, even a fan can be a letter if the hand holding it knows the code. Above the soft clatter of cups, you catch a fragment of Latin, then a sonnet in Italian that leans on you like a friendly shoulder. She recites with poise, and the room steadies. Someone laughs a heartbeat too late. Some men will say they come here for beauty. Many stay because they do not remember the last time a woman asked them a question they could not answer. A courtesan hears the stutter in a sentence and knows who will win the debate tomorrow. She hears the pause between the third and fourth word and knows the household that will need extra credit extended at month end. Venice is a school, and she is 10 steps ahead of the teacher. You stand at the edge and let the sensations catalog themselves. The lace scratches the barest bit at your wrist. Candle smoke feeds the sweetness until it is almost savory. In the corner, a painter squints, cheeks streaked with ochre, trying to decide if the blue of a ribbon is closer to sky or to memory. He has not paid rent in 2 months and calls it an experiment in living with fewer distractions. There is a rumor he will paint a portrait no one will admit to owning. The city is rich in art, richer still in stories, and richest of all in how those stories are told. A thin man in crimson leans near you and pretends to ask for the time. He is not here for the hour. He is here to collect a phrase to repeat at a different table tomorrow. Courtesans navigate these eddies of listening with the calm of gondoliers steering through a crowd. They nod to the right person, ignore the wrong person, direct a glance like a small, polite wind. When the lute player hits a sour note, half the room pretends not to notice. The other half smiles. Both halves are trying to be kind. It is the sort of kindness that keeps cities from breaking. This is the promise and the trap of Renaissance Venice. Sumptuary laws say who may wear pearls and how many rows, who may use gold braid, who must stay with wool. The city prints new rules, and the city invents new costumes to slip through them. Courtesans are not lawbreakers by habit. They are readers of fine print. They understand where respect begins and where performance will carry you the rest of the way. When a nobleman boasts of his lineage, a courtesan asks about his credit and his plans for the spring fleet. If you are allergic to lace, apologies in advance. There is a great deal of lace. Tonight you will not memorize names. You will absorb a rhythm. You will sense the push and pull that makes a person at once admired and judged, sought and scolded, praised in private and denied in public. Some will call these women symbols of vice. Some will call them muses. Some will call them accountants with better shoes. Historians still debate whether the salons that orbit these women functioned as true engines of civic discussion, or whether later writers made them larger in memory than they were in the day. Either way, the chairs are full, the verses flow, and decisions lean in this direction before they lean anywhere else. You take another pastille, mostly because it gives your hands something to do. A woman passes with a pomander ball of gilded filigree, clove and musk wafting through its little vents. She laughs with 3 notes that sound rehearsed but are not. Someone compliments the lace. Someone else asks for a book. The conversation turns to a new map of the Adriatic, to a price of pepper, to a rumor that a cardinal will visit in secret next week. The joke, whispered near you, is that a cardinal in Venice is never out of season. The room snorts like schoolchildren. The city pretends to glare and then forgives you. If you listen closely, you can hear the water outside knocking softly against stone. The city talks in that language too. It tells you that power rarely sits on a throne. It prefers a chair with good light and better company. It tells you that memory is not a courtroom. It is a canal that remembers every oar. Perhaps you will not survive this century. None of us do. But you can survive this evening, and in surviving it, you can learn what this world asks of a woman who decides to be more than a name in a ledger. You can learn what it asks of a city that wants to be holy and wealthy and admired all at once. If you are very quiet, the room will tell you the truth. It will tell you that nothing here is accidental. Not the color of the ribbon, not the order of the songs, not the distance between 2 chairs. If this kind of slow history helps you rest, you can subscribe and leave a comment about where you are listening from and what time of night. Now turn off the light, switch on a gentle fan, let the air move like water, and come closer. We will go behind the curtains, out into the streets, and into the offices where the rules are written. The masks do not come off. You simply walk past them. You step away from the Venetian chamber and out into the broader air of Renaissance Italy. The streets are uneven stone, slick with the memory of rain, and the houses lean toward each other, as if gossiping across the narrow lanes. Lanterns hang like tired moons, their light painting the canal water with restless gold.
Somewhere in the dark, a gondola slides by, or tapping like a metronome. The city does not sleep, it merely changes costume. This is the late 15th century and the early 16th, an age when the map of Europe looks like a patchwork quilt and Italy is its most vivid piece. There is no single Italy, only city-states bristling with pride. Venice, Florence, Milan, Rome, each a republic or duchy or papal domain with its own flag, its own coins, its own stubborn story. Wealth flows in through trade, silks from the East, spices from Alexandria, gold from Africa. Venice has grown fat on commerce, its ships pulling threads across the entire Mediterranean. Florence has grown famous for banking, its ledgers balancing kingdoms the way a tightrope walker balances on rope. Rome, swollen with papal pomp, commands armies of both soldiers and ideas. You feel the tension of politics in the air, as tangibly as you feel the damp mist from the lagoon. In 1494, the French marched across the Alps, testing the strength of Italian walls and the patience of Italian alliances. In 1527, mercenaries sacked Rome, and the Eternal City trembled with fire and loot. The years are punctuated by treaties that do not last and wars that do. Italy is a prize everyone covets, from France to Spain to the Holy Roman Empire. Courtesans do not hold swords, but they live in the wake of these campaigns. They hear plans whispered in bedchambers and watch coins change hands in parlors. Life for the ordinary citizen is a mixture of constraint and delight. Markets bustle with figs and olives, with fabric dyed in colors that sumptuary laws reserve for certain classes. A baker sells bread that is more crust than crumb, and children gnaw on chestnuts roasted until their shells split like secrets. At night, the taverns smell of sour wine and garlic, and the gossip carries faster than the drink. If you tilt your head, you can hear the sound of dice rolling, the slap of cards, the chuckle of someone who should not be laughing so loudly. Not all smells are pleasant. The drains of Venice empty directly into the canals, and the air wavers between perfume and rot. Florence's streets are crowded with tanners whose vats reek of hides and urine. Rome clatters with carts carrying stone for yet another palace that promises immortality. The Renaissance is not an abstract age of paintings and inventions. It is noisy, sweaty, crowded, and alive. Among the objects of daily life, one detail deserves pause. In Venice, a popular snack sold by vendors at dawn is fried polenta cakes sprinkled with honey. Hot, sticky, and filling, they are the breakfast of boatmen and courtesans alike, consumed quickly before the day demands its full performance. Imagine the steam rising in the fog, fingers burned slightly by the oil, tongue soothed by the sugar. A historian can spend pages on alliances and battles, but the fried polenta cake may tell you more about how a day actually began. Venice itself is a contradiction floating on water. The city is technically a republic, with an elected doge at its head, yet its oligarchy of merchant families controls decisions with an iron hand, gloved in silk. Florence brims with humanist thinkers who write of liberty while the Medici family consolidates power in careful increments. Rome preaches salvation while its clergy commission frescoes that glorify earthly beauty. The contradictions are not hidden, they are flaunted. That is the stage upon which courtesans will perform. It is important to remember that women's lives in this period are bound by rules written by men. Most are expected to marry, to bear children, to remain in the shadow of a husband's reputation. Education for women is rare, reserved for convents or aristocratic households. To speak in public with confidence is almost an act of defiance. To earn money independently is nearly scandalous. Against this backdrop, the courtesan appears, a figure who converses with scholars, recites poetry, manages her own finances, and entertains princes as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That such a role existed is itself remarkable. Some historians debate whether courtesans truly had power or whether their influence has been romanticized. Did they shape policy, or did they merely decorate the spaces where policy was made? The answer may lie somewhere in between. What is certain is that their names appear in letters, in court records, in poems, and in paintings. They are more than whispers. They are part of the archive, though often pushed to its margins. Now step back again and take the panorama. Renaissance Italy is not a backdrop painted in still colors. It is a living, shifting arena where trade, war, art, and faith collide. Courtesans walk its corridors with practiced grace. Their story cannot be told without this broader setting, because it is precisely here, amid wealth and ruin, rules and loopholes, that their lives take shape. So hold on to that smell of fried polenta with honey. Hold on to the sound of coins clinking in the dark. Hold on to the picture of ships gliding into port under sails swollen with spice-laden winds. Because soon you will see how one woman at a candlelit table, speaking a sonnet, could bend the current of conversation as surely as the tide bends a gondola.
The door opens and morning seeps into a room painted by candle soot. You are no longer a guest hovering at the edge of a ball. You are in her chamber now, the space where the performance begins before the world arrives. The floor is wood, uneven but scrubbed, and the first sound is the scratch of a brush through hair that spills like ink across linen. You can almost feel the tug at your own scalp as each knot resists and then gives way. The air carries yesterday's perfume, faint violet and musk clinging to the fabric as if unwilling to be dismissed. You sit at the table where a small mirror waits, its silver dulled, its surface a little warped. In that reflection, you study yourself. You are a courtesan of Venice, though the city outside insists on labeling you with other words, some softer, some crueler. This morning, your body feels heavy but alert, like a violin tuned too tightly. You stretch your fingers and check your voice with a line of Petrarch. It comes out cracked, so you sip water infused with a sliver of cinnamon bark. The spice burns and steadies you at once. Outside, the city stirs. Oars knock against water, fishmongers shout, bells mark the hour of terrace. A neighbor coughs through the thin wall, reminding you that Venice is built from proximity as much as stone. You smooth the fabric of your gown, a second-hand satin dyed the deep green of lagoon weeds. It is not new, but it is yours, paid for with coins that arrived not from husband or father, but from your own work. That detail alone sets you apart in this city of men. The first visitor is not a lover, but a tailor's apprentice delivering ribbons. He stammers when he sees you, his cheeks blotched with the rush of youth. You let him speak, let him mispronounce your name. Then you laugh gently to ease his shame. Laughter is a tool. It disarms, it charms, it erases small debts of embarrassment. As he leaves, you notice he has left behind a scrap of cloth. You tuck it away knowing you might trade it later for a favor, or simply keep it as proof that mornings can begin with accident rather than intention. The day expands. You receive a letter sealed with wax, the crest blurred as if its owner pressed it in haste. You open it carefully, inhaling the faint trace of resin. Inside, a request for an evening meeting. The words are flattering, the handwriting arrogant. You know enough to prepare not only your dress, but your mind. Courtesans are not valued solely for the curve of a smile. They are expected to discuss poetry, politics, even the new astronomical theories that claim the sun, not the earth, is the center. Some men want to test your knowledge, others want to borrow it. A few want to be illuminated by it without admitting as much. At midday, hunger nudges you. A servant brings a plate of boiled beans sprinkled with vinegar, the poor man's lunch disguised as elegance. You chew slowly, imagining a richer feast, but the vinegar has its virtue. It sharpens the senses, clears the mouth. Food in this world is never just food. It is a code of status, a rehearsal of appearances. Tonight, the beans will be forgotten, replaced by candied almonds and spiced wine at someone else's table. But for now, they anchor you to the day. A historian might pause here and ask, how accurate is this picture? Some argue that courtesans lived in perpetual splendor, others that they scraped by like actors between performances. The truth likely oscillates. There were courtesans of great wealth who owned palaces, and there were others who drifted at the edge of ruin. To collapse them into one stereotype is to miss the variety of lives carried on slender shoulders. You lean out the window for a breath of air. Below, children chase a hoop, their laughter rising like gulls. A gondolier sings off-key, though with conviction. The smell of fish mingles with the sweetness of a baker's tray cooling on a sill. Venice is not designed for silence. It insists you listen to its symphony whether you ask or not. Afternoon brings a visitor of another kind, a scholar with ink-stained fingers and restless eyes. He bows too deeply, nearly toppling, then launches into a question about Dante. You answer with a verse, not from Dante, but from your own small notebook. He freezes, surprised, and then smiles with the delight of someone who has found treasure where he expected only ornament. You know he will repeat your lines later at his study circle, forgetting to mention your name. You do not mind. Names slip away, but influence seeps like dye through fabric. As the sun drops, shadows climb the walls. You light a lamp scented with oil of rosemary. The fragrance clears the head, wards off insects, and signals that the performance of evening is about to begin. Your gown is changed, your hair arranged, your voice warmed. The beans are long forgotten. The city waits beyond the door, and you step towards it with calm that is half practiced, half genuine. And so your first day, or rather your first scene, closes. You have felt the tug of hair, tasted the sharpness of vinegar, spoken lines that may outlive you in another man's voice. You have been both subject and object, listener and lecturer, ornament and oracle. You are not yet at the center of power, but you orbit close enough to feel its heat. Now rest your hands on the table. Feel the grain of the wood. Tomorrow will demand the same balancing act, and tomorrow, too, you will find a way to stand.
Evening fades into night, and then into another morning that tastes less like promise and more like survival. You wake in a room where the air has grown thin with smoke from last night's lamp. Your throat scratches. Your stomach reminds you it has been fed but not satisfied. The glamour of satin sleeves and candlelit verses does not erase the practical truth. Hunger arrives whether or not you are admired. The brazier in the corner has burned itself out, leaving only cold ash. The air cuts sharper against your skin than you expected. You pull a shawl across your shoulders, wool thin enough to let the chill through, thick enough to remind you of its weight. Winter in Venice is damp, the kind of damp that seeps through walls and bones alike. It is not the grand enemy sung about in poems, but it is the constant adversary of every morning. On the table lies your breakfast, if it can be called that. A hard crust of bread, stale and mottled, revived with a little wine poured over it. This is not the feasting food that visitors imagine when they think of Renaissance luxury. This is the everyday compromise. The bread tastes faintly of mold and memory, but it fills the stomach just enough to keep your body upright. Some courtesans with wealth dine on marzipan and roast capon. Many others live on bread that must be coaxed back to life with liquid. Today, you belong to the second category. The hunger does not humiliate you, it focuses you. It is one more rhythm in the score of this life. Tonight you may sit at a table with honeyed almonds again, but for now you gnaw on resilience disguised as food. A joke runs through your head. If Venice had an early form of Instagram, courtesans would post glossy paintings of banquet tables while in reality chewing old crusts in cold rooms. The thought makes you smile despite yourself. You think of the laws written to control what you can wear, but not what you can eat. The Republic worried more about pearls than about hunger. Honest courtesans were permitted silk gowns, but forbidden too many jewels. Lower courtesans were marked by coarser fabric, though most ignored the rule when they could. Bread, however, was never legislated. Everyone's stomach growled at the same pace. That is one small democracy Venice never intended. Later in the day, you cross the city to meet a patron. The walk is long, over bridges arched like ribs, through alleys so narrow you can feel plaster brush your sleeves. You notice children clutching hot chestnuts sold in paper cones, their fingers red with warmth. You would give coins for one, but you save them. Practicality always hovers at your shoulder. You remember a proverb: "Money is a better lover than any man." It is cruel, but it keeps you steady. The patron greets you in a chamber perfumed with myrrh. He speaks of trade routes, of Florentine bankers, of the possibility of war. You nod, you answer, you play the role of a listener who also shapes the conversation. You know that while he imagines himself the master of his story, you are storing details like a scribe. Hunger has sharpened your hearing. Cold has made you still enough to notice. You do not waste the lesson. Historians still argue about whether courtesans truly carried political influence, or whether later centuries embroidered their importance like gold thread on plain cloth. Did they sway policy, or merely decorate the men who did? Yet evidence lies in letters, in transactions, in subtle shifts of allegiance. You do not need to rewrite the chronicles, you only need to keep your eyes open. Influence is a silent currency, and you have learned its exchange rate. As you leave, the air strikes colder. The canal wind slices through the shawl, and you clutch it tighter. A gondolier offers passage, but the fare is steep. You choose instead to walk, boots dampening with every puddle. Each step reminds you of the bread in your stomach, not heavy enough to anchor, not light enough to forget. By the time you reach your chamber again, your body aches with the kind of fatigue that asks not for luxury, but simply for warmth. Back inside, you relight the brazier, watching the flame struggle before catching. The smoke curls upward like a tired sigh. You settle onto the bench and breathe. The cold has not defeated you. The hunger has not silenced you. And yet both remain. They are part of the texture of this existence, threads woven alongside silks and sonnets. A courtesan is not only a creature of perfume and poetry. She is a body negotiating cold, a stomach measuring meals, a woman balancing on the knife edge of admiration and need. Tonight there will be company, laughter, verses traded like jewels. But beneath it all remains the memory of moldy bread and damp air. That memory steadies you. It teaches you that glamour is only half the story, and survival is the other half. Without one, the other collapses. And so the first hardship has pressed its mark on you, not in catastrophe, but in the quiet persistence of hunger and cold. Tomorrow will demand more, and you will meet it. For now you let the shawl slip from your shoulders and listen to the city breathing through the cracks.
The night does not offer much rest. The blanket is thin, the brazier coughs its last coal, and the damp works its way into your chest. By dawn, your breath rattles faintly, a sound you hope no one else can hear. Venice in winter is an expert at finding every weakness in a body. A city built on water teaches you that nothing ever fully dries, not your shoes, not your lungs, not even your hope.
You rise anyway, voice heavy, limbs aching. The mirror shows shadows under your eyes, a reminder that glamour and fatigue are always waging their secret duel. You rub your temples and drink a cup of water warmed over ash, bitter with the taste of smoke. The body protests, but the day does not wait. You must be ready when the knock comes, and the knock always comes. Your shoes betray you first. The leather is cracked, the soles thin. Every step on the damp stones sends a reminder upward, a little jab through your bones. You wrap strips of cloth around your feet before slipping them inside, a trick learned from others who walked too far with too little. It is not comfort, but it is survival. Courtesans in paintings are always barefoot or in velvet slippers. In reality, most of them limped home with blisters wrapped in scraps of linen. The city outside is alive, but not in a healthy way. Illness runs through Venice like gossip, quick and relentless. The damp climate breeds fevers, coughs, and worse. You pass a family with a child bundled tight, his face flushed, his mother whispering prayers to Saint Roch, patron of plague victims. The smell of vinegar floats through the air, not from salad, but from attempts of purification. It does not cure, but it comforts. Back in your chamber, you chew a clove to freshen your breath and to calm your throat. The taste is sharp, almost medicinal. You remember a friend who swore by garlic boiled in milk to cure fevers, and you laugh softly at the memory. If such a concoction truly worked, Venice would smell less like perfume and more like a kitchen. A bitter joke, but jokes keep you upright when your body wants to fold. The afternoon patron arrives early, perfumed, eager, oblivious to the fact that you are shivering. You smile. You perform. You hold yourself together. The performance is not only charm, it is endurance. Every gesture costs effort. Every laugh is wrestled from fatigue. He notices nothing, or perhaps he chooses not to notice. Men often prefer the illusion of your strength to the reality of your weakness. Historians note that Venetian courtesans often sought physicians, some even employing personal doctors. Yet records also show many died young, their wealth unable to buy health. A scholar once argued that courtesans embodied the paradox of Renaissance life, celebrated for vitality, undone by fragility. The debate lingers, but the truth is simpler when you feel the cough scratch your throat. A body is a body, no matter how finely dressed. You glance at the shelf where letters and trinkets pile. Among them is a small vial of rosewater, given as a gift, meant to scent the air. Tonight you pour a drop into your drink, hoping its sweetness will mask the bitterness of fatigue. It does not, but the ritual comforts you. Objects are anchors, however flimsy. A ribbon, a vial, a letter. Each a reminder that you are not invisible, that someone once thought of you long enough to offer something tangible. Evening brings no relief. You force yourself into a gown, adjust the fall of your hair, and paint your lips with carmine. The reflection in the mirror looks radiant to others, but you know how much effort it costs. Beneath the surface lies a woman who has not slept, who coughs into her sleeve when no one looks, who wonders how long the body can maintain this fragile equilibrium. At the gathering, laughter swells, wine flows, poetry is recited. You recite too, though your voice falters on certain syllables. A man compliments the music of your tone, unaware that what he hears as music is simply the tremor of exhaustion. You smile at the irony. If only fatigue could be bottled and sold as charm, Venice would have a new export.
Later, alone again, you peel off the gown, cough into the dark, and sit with your thoughts. The city outside sings its watery lullaby, but your body refuses to sleep. The bed creaks as you shift, searching for a posture that does not ache. None exists. You press your palm against the wall, damp and cool, and imagine the stone absorbing your weakness. For a moment, it feels like sharing a burden. The hardship here is not dramatic, not the sort sung about in epics. It is the daily erosion of health and strength, the slow theft of vitality. Courtesans are painted as eternal youth, but behind every portrait lies a woman who struggled with coughs, with sores, with broken shoes, with sleepless nights. The paradox of this life is clear. You are expected to appear untouchable while being made of the same fragile flesh as everyone else. And still you continue. Tomorrow you will wrap your shoes in cloth again. Tomorrow you will sip water from smoky ash. Tomorrow you will laugh at a joke and hide the cough in the same breath. This is not defeat. It is practice. Survival is always rehearsal for the next performance.
Tonight, we tilt the lens slightly. You have walked in the shoes of one courtesan, shoes lined with cloth against blisters, shoes damp with Venetian rain. Now you cross the canal to inhabit another perspective. The city is too vast, too layered to see through a single pair of eyes. Picture a man, a scribe in service to the Chancery of Venice. His fingers are black with ink, nails permanently stained, his back curved from bending over parchment. By day, he copies decrees. By night, he haunts taverns, ears open for gossip that might help him rise. His pay is small, his ambition large. He is not a courtesan nor a patron, but he is woven into their world. He sees them arrive at council chambers with noblemen, hears their names whispered in legal disputes, notes their influence in decisions dressed up as law. The scribe lives in a modest room above a baker's shop. The air smells perpetually of yeast and smoke. In the mornings, he eats scraps of bread the baker cannot sell, dipped in thin wine. A humble meal, yet he tells himself it binds him to the same rhythms as courtesans, merchants, gondoliers. Hunger is democratic, even when wealth is not. One evening, returning from work, he encounters her, a courtesan stepping from a gondola, laughter drifting like perfume behind her. He notices the ripple she causes in the crowd. Men pause, women whisper, children stare as if a saint has passed. To him, she looks less like a saint and more like a cipher, a person who collects secrets the way others collect coins. He wonders if her smile conceals treaties, if her gesture erases debts. He wonders how much of Venice is governed not by doges or councils, but by moments like this, passing in silence on a narrow dock. At his desk, the scribe records names, figures, property transfers. One entry lingers, a house purchased in the name of a woman with no husband. The ink blots slightly where his quill trembles. Everyone knows who she is. He writes the record anyway. Officially, the Republic pretends she is invisible. Unofficially, the Republic relies on her silver to keep commerce flowing. It is one of the quiet absurdities that keeps his pen moving. Sometimes he receives letters for delivery disguised as petitions or trade notes. Once he opens one. Inside, a verse of poetry written in a hand that belongs more to salons than to chancery. It is not a state secret, but a love poem promising devotion between bouts of commerce. He smiles at the irony. The Republic guards against spies and foreign invasion, yet its own magistrates spill their hearts into courtesans' laps. He reseals the letter and delivers it, but the memory stays with him. The scribe is not immune to fatigue either. His eyes sting from lamp smoke. His wrist aches from endless repetition. He envies courtesans for their velvet gowns and gilded hairnets, yet he also pities them. He has seen court cases where courtesans were fined for wearing forbidden jewels, mocked in pamphlets, accused of witchcraft when they grew too influential. Their wealth is precarious, their power conditional. He recognizes in them the same fragility he feels in himself, useful but replaceable. A detail, small but telling. In his drawer he keeps a scrap of parchment not for official use, but for himself. On it he copies verses he overhears, fragments of speeches, jokes told in taverns. Among them is a line from a courtesan he once listened to at a gathering. "The city is a mask that only reveals what you are brave enough to imagine." He does not know if she invented it, but he cherishes it. It reminds him that even ink-stained hands can grasp at beauty. Historians argue whether men like this scribe truly intersected with courtesans' lives, or whether their proximity is exaggerated. Records show clerks were often involved in legal disputes concerning property owned by women, so the overlap seems certain. What remains debated is whether such men saw courtesans as allies, rivals, or mysteries. The question lingers like a watermark on vellum, faint but present. Tonight, as he sets down his quill, the scribe thinks of her again, not as a fantasy, but as a sign of what Venice really is, a city where power flows in unconventional currents, where ink and laughter, decrees and verses coexist in the same narrow alleyways. He blows out his lamp and listens to the canal slap gently against stone. The perspective has shifted, yet the city remains the same. Hunger, fatigue, ambition, secrecy, they bind courtesans and clerks alike. You have now heard two voices, two rhythms, beating within the same watery heart. The scribe's candle burns lower than it should. He promised himself he would sleep after finishing the last decree, but ink has a way of dragging hours into the marrow of the night. By the time he notices the sky paling over the lagoon, his hand trembles and his eyelids ache as if lined with grit. Sleep is no longer a companion, but an enemy he must keep at bay. He chews fennel seeds to stay awake, their flavor sharp and grassy, leaving his mouth dry. It is a poor man's stimulant, less elegant than the exotic coffee beginning to arrive in Venetian ports, too expensive for clerks to taste more than once in a lifetime. He smiles at the thought. If sleep-deprived scholars of Florence had Instagram, every page would be filled with cups of thick, bitter coffee, each caption insisting that brilliance requires bitterness. Instead, he has fennel and fatigue. The work before him blurs. Names slip into one another. Numbers slide across the page. He dips his quill, leaves a blot, curses softly. A pamphlet lies folded under the decrees, a satire mocking a courtesan for wearing pearls too many rows thick. He should not keep it, but the humor makes him laugh even as his ribs ache with exhaustion. Venice thrives on laughter sharpened into knives. Outside, the bells strike prime. Gondoliers call to each other, their voices cutting across the water. The scribe's head drops. He shakes himself awake and forces his gaze back to the parchment. His chest feels tight, not with sickness, but with sheer depletion. His body begs for a bed. His ambition orders him back to the desk. He obeys ambition. Later that day, he drags himself through the chancery, a ghost among clerks. His superior notices his pale face and mutters something about weak constitutions. The scribe swallows his irritation. He knows the truth. This exhaustion is not weakness, but service. Venice consumes its scribes the way it consumes spices, ships, and stories. He takes his place, scratches at the parchment, pretends his bones are not hollow. In the tavern that evening, he tries to revive himself with cheap wine watered beyond taste. The drink dulls his mind instead of sharpening it. He watches others laugh, slam dice on tables, trade insults that turn into embraces. His own laugh comes late, sluggish. Across the room, a courtesan enters, silk brushing the dirty floor. For a moment, the tavern hushes. She orders nothing extravagant, only a bowl of broth. The scribe notes this detail. Even glamour has its limits. Even muses must eat. Historians debate how courtesans were perceived in these spaces. Were they welcomed for wit or tolerated for spectacle? Documents suggest both. Some saw them as vital to the city's cultural pulse, others as parasites feeding on its wealth. Our scribe leans toward the first view. To him, their presence proves that beauty and intellect can command attention in a room otherwise dulled by accounts and contracts. He copies her words in his memory, storing them for another long night. When he finally stumbles home, his body is near collapse. His shoes scrape the stones. His eyes blur the torches along the canals into smeared halos. He mutters a joke to himself. If Venice ever invented a cure for sleeplessness, it would probably be taxed, counterfeited, and outlawed in the same week. He laughs softly at his own wit, a laugh half broken by a yawn. In his room, he collapses on the bed without undressing. The straw mattress pricks through the thin sheet. He lies listening to the baker downstairs pounding dough, a steady rhythm that mocks his racing heart. His hands twitch with the phantom movement of writing, as if his body continues the task even in rest. Finally, his breath steadies, but the sleep that comes is shallow, punctured by dreams of ink spilling across endless pages. The hardship of sleeplessness is not as visible as hunger or cold, but it gnaws from within. It blurs lines between reality and imagination. It turns mistakes into records that cannot be erased. For the scribe, fatigue is both punishment and proof of loyalty. Venice asks him to give his nights, and he complies. The courtesans glitter in salons. He scratches in silence, yet both pay their price in hours stolen from the body. When dawn comes again, he wakes more tired than before. He rinses his mouth with vinegar water, chews another fennel seed, and prepares to repeat the cycle. The city outside hums, relentless, indifferent. He straightens his shoulders, dips his quill, and writes as if the ink itself were keeping him alive.
The days stretch indistinguishable, and the scribe's exhaustion begins to shift from body to mind. It is one thing to endure hunger or sleeplessness. It is another to watch the edges of your judgment fray. He finds himself staring at words he copies, unable to tell if they belong to the decree or to some dreams stitched from fatigue. The letters float, rearrange, mock him. Venice asks for precision, but his thoughts wander like smoke. One evening, he is summoned to copy testimony from a trial. The case involves a nobleman accused of bribery, though everyone whispers that the real heart of the matter is his entanglement with a courtesan. The room smells of wax and ink, and the accused sits pale but defiant. The scribe dips his quill, but his hand trembles. He writes the words, yet cannot help thinking of the courtesan behind them, her face blurred by rumor, her presence both central and absent. He wonders if she sits now in a chamber of her own, listening for news of a verdict that will shape her future more than his. The testimony twists into accusation, then defense, then silence. He copies every word, but inside doubt gnaws. Venice claims to be a republic, a city of laws, yet he sees how easily the truth is bent by wealth, by reputation, by charm.
He asks himself, though not aloud, whether justice here is anything more than performance, a mask like those worn during carnival. That night the scribe cannot sleep. His conscience circles the testimony like a hawk circling a field. He wonders if he has betrayed someone by writing faithfully, or if he would have betrayed more by altering a word. He mutters to himself in the dark, rehearsing arguments with invisible judges. The city outside offers no comfort. The canals lap indifferently, as if washing away questions rather than answering them. To steady himself, he writes in his private notebook. Not decrees, not testimony, but fragments of thought. What is truth when ink can dress lies as law? What is freedom when even laughter is rehearsed? He pauses, then adds a line overheard in a salon. A courtesan once said that men love mirrors more than women, for mirrors do not speak. He cannot decide if it was wisdom or jest, but he copies it anyway. The next day he carries a folded scrap in his pocket, a note he has written to himself. It reads simply, "Remember you are human." He fingers it often, as if touch alone can keep his conscience from dissolving. Yet the work demands more. He records property seized from a debtor, knowing the debtor's children will starve. He copies the fine levied against a courtesan for wearing pearls, though he has seen senators' wives flaunt the same. The hypocrisy tightens around him like damp rope. In the tavern, the laughter that once amused him now grates. Jokes about courtesans sting sharper, not because they mock, but because they reduce living women into caricatures. He sips watered wine and remains silent. A friend asks if he is ill. He replies only that the ink has seeped into his blood. They laughed, thinking it a jest. He does not correct them. Historians debate whether men in his position ever truly resisted, whether clerks or scribes pushed back against injustice or simply survived it. Records show few rebellions of conscience. Most ink flowed as ordered. Yet there are hints in marginalia, little scribbles in Latin that suggest frustration, doubt, even rebellion. Our scribe belongs to that shadowed category, those who did not shout in the piazza, but who whispered into margins that history now struggles to hear. A moment comes late at night. He is called to transcribe a private letter for a magistrate too weary to write himself. The words are meant for a courtesan, filled with flattery and promises. He copies them faithfully, but when he is alone, he adds a single comma where none was intended. A pause, almost invisible. It changes nothing and everything. It is his way of reminding himself that ink can resist, however slightly. But resistance carries a price. The next morning he feels heavier, not lighter. Conscience does not soothe, it sharpens. He wonders how long he can live this way, copying words he does not believe, serving a city that grinds conscience as easily as it grinds grain. He looks out at the lagoon, gray and endless, and feels the same weight pressing in. Still he works. He dips the quill, scratches the parchment, blots the excess. Fatigue and doubt blur together until he can no longer tell one from the other. This is the second hardship, not hunger, not sleeplessness, but the erosion of certainty. When you cannot tell if you are honest or complicit, the soul begins to cough as loudly as the body ever did.
The city exhales, and for a moment you are not caught in testimony or salons, not in hunger or ambition. Time lengthens into something slower, almost tender. You sit in a room where nothing extraordinary happens, and that is the extraordinary thing. The sound arrives first, a broom scraping stone in the courtyard below. Steady, repetitive, unhurried. The rhythm lulls you, a reminder that the world continues in small chores while politics and poetry chase themselves ragged. A pigeon flutters onto the sill, cooing with a throat that sounds too soft for such a stubborn bird. You watch it tilt its head, one eye on you, one eye on its own reflection in the glass. Venice is a city of mirrors, even for birds. The chamber itself is not grand. The table bears scratches, the brazier smokes more than it warms, the walls are blotched with damp. Yet there is comfort in its imperfection. You trace a crack in the plaster with your fingertip, as if following a map to nowhere. Dust lies on the shelf where letters lean like tired soldiers. The ordinary is its own cathedral. On the table sits a small bowl of figs, dried and wrinkled, gifted by a neighbor who received them from a cousin inland. Their sweetness is muted, more memory than fruit. You chew one slowly, seeds crackling under your teeth, and think how every flavor carries its own history. Somewhere in these figs lingers the heat of a Tuscan sun you have never seen. Eating them feels like borrowing another life for a few seconds. Time passes differently in these lulls. Minutes stretch long, hours collapse short. You listen to your own breathing, to the distant strike of bells marking none of your business. You do not hurry. Even the ink on the desk waits patiently, quill resting across the inkwell like a tired limb. It is in such moments that reflection creeps in. You remember laughter at last night's gathering, the way someone spilled wine and tried to hide it with a joke. You remember the cough that threatened to betray you, the shawl that smelled of smoke. You wonder which details history will keep, the decrees signed by senators, or the stain of wine on a silk hem. You suspect the latter is truer. A soft knock at the door interrupts. It is not a patron or a magistrate, only a neighbor's child bringing a crust of bread left over from supper. She hands it to you, shyly, eyes wide. The bread is hard, almost a weapon, but you accept it with gratitude. You make her laugh by pretending to weigh it as if it were gold. She giggles and runs off, leaving behind an echo warmer than the bread itself. You sit again, tearing the crust slowly. It crumbles more than it feeds. You dip it into watered wine and chew. The taste is nothing remarkable, yet the act carries comfort. Food is less about luxury than about continuity. Bread yesterday, bread today, bread tomorrow, a thread tying days together when grandeur cannot. Historians sometimes overlook these small rhythms, preferring to chase wars and treaties. Yet without bread, without figs, without brooms scraping courtyards, no city endures. The interlude is as essential as the battle. Some scholars even argue that to understand Venice, one must listen not to its councils, but to its kitchens. It is an argument worth savoring, even if disputed. A stray thought crosses your mind. If courtesans had diaries, perhaps most pages would not be about wealthy patrons or glittering evenings, but about shoes too tight, figs too dry, bread too stale, shawls too thin, the little discomforts that fill more hours than triumphs ever do. You smile at the idea, half amusement, half truth. The pigeon has not left the sill. It puffs its chest, coos again, then drops a feather that drifts lazily into the room. You pick it up, gray and soft, a fragile relic of nothing in particular. You set it between the pages of a book, not because it matters, but because it doesn't. Ordinary things deserve preservation too. The broom below pauses. Silence spreads, wide enough to feel like a sea. In this hush, you sense the weight of repetition. Every day, someone sweeps, someone feeds pigeons, someone shares bread. The city does not notice, but the city survives because of it. You lean back, eyes heavy but calm. For the first time in days, the fatigue feels less like erosion and more like rest. You do not need to perform in this moment. You do not need to argue with conscience. You simply exist,
and existence is enough. A small joke flickers in your head. If Venice ever wrote its memoirs, half the chapters would be about sweeping courtyards. The thought makes you chuckle softly. It is not brilliance, but it is true. The bells strike again, pulling you gently from the lull. The city resumes its rhythm. You rise, stretch, and prepare to re-enter the larger story. But you carry the interlude with you, the fig, the crust of bread, the pigeon feather pressed between pages. These small things will outlast the decrees in ways history has not yet decided.
The curtain lifts again, and this time the stage is not a salon or a tavern, but a chamber of records. Stone walls, shelves sagging with scrolls and ledgers, a silence broken only by quills scratching and the faint cough of dust unsettled. If salons were theaters of charm, this is the theater of bureaucracy. Here, power is less velvet and more parchment. Venice prides itself on order. The Republic writes laws the way a composer writes notes, measured, deliberate, meant to control the rhythm of life. But every law tells its own secret. On one page, decrees forbid courtesans from wearing pearls larger than a pea. On another, rules dictate the colors of gowns permitted to women of certain classes. One cannot help but notice the absurd precision, as if the stability of the Republic depended less on fleets and more on the length of a necklace. You imagine the clerks who penned these words, hunched like the scribe we followed earlier, their quills stiff with fatigue. Did they smile at the absurdity, or did they simply copy, knowing better than to question? A decree from 1543 states that courtesans caught parading in jewels beyond their station would pay a fine or face confiscation. Yet records show fines were often quietly ignored if the courtesan's patron held influence. The law was not so much a boundary as it was a bargaining chip. But paper cannot feed bellies. Inevitably, the weight of shortage presses down. Venice has always relied on ships to bring in grain, yet storms, wars, and blockades remind the city that even the proudest fleet cannot command the weather. In years when harvests fail or trade routes falter, hunger creeps through palaces and alleys alike. Courtesans, merchants, scribes, gondoliers all discover how thin the line is between display and deprivation. One such season arrives in memory. The granaries thin. Bakers stretch dough with barley husks, sawdust rumors, anything to make a loaf appear larger than it is. Bread darkens, hardens, becomes less nourishment than symbol. People call it pane nero, black bread, though some joke it is better suited to patching walls than filling stomachs. Even courtesans, who once entertained over platters of sugared almonds, find themselves chewing crusts until their jaws ache. Imagine the day. A courtesan wakes, hair tangled, stomach hollow. Her chamber smells of damp wool and cold ash. She unwraps a small loaf, purchased at double yesterday's price. The crust is cracked like old stone. She breaks it, and a spray of husk crumbles to the floor. She eats anyway. It scratches her throat, but it steadies her legs enough to walk into the night's performance. Outwardly she glimmers. Inwardly she counts every bite like a coin. The scribe suffers in his own way. Long nights copying decrees are harder on an empty belly. His hand cramps, his vision blurs. He mutters to himself that even ink grows thin when bread does. To keep himself awake, he chews bitter chicory root, a poor substitute for coffee, staining his tongue dark. He jokes quietly that he has discovered a new Venetian delicacy, the flavor of exhaustion. No one laughs, but the quip comforts him. Shortages breed more than hunger. They breed unrest. Records from the 16th century describe riots over bread prices, Mobs storming bakeries, women shouting in the piazza with babies on their hips. Courtesans, too, appear in these accounts, not always as rioters, but sometimes as protectors, sending servants to stand in line, bribing bakers for better flour, even sharing food with poorer neighbors to keep goodwill. Historians argue whether such gestures were charity or strategy. Likely both. Survival rarely separates the two. The worst days etch themselves deepest. One afternoon, rain lashes the canals, wind howls through shutters, and food simply does not arrive. The market stalls are bare. A courtesan wraps herself in a shawl and ventures out, hoping for something, anything. She finds a vendor with a pot of soup thin as water, flavored with cabbage leaves and bones boiled too long. She pays dearly for a bowl and drinks it in the rain. The taste is closer to memory than meal, yet the warmth trickles through her veins like mercy. Later, that night, she hosts a gathering. Patrons expect wit, music, perhaps even laughter. She delivers all three, her stomach hollow beneath silks. They never know. She recites a sonnet, and the room applauds, unaware that hunger sharpened her voice more than talent did. Such is the paradox. Deprivation creates the edge that dazzles, even as it corrodes. For the scribe, the worst day is quieter. He arrives at the chancery to find his superior absent, the office colder than usual. His desk holds only parchment and an inkwell nearly dry. He dips his quill and scratches anyway, though his stomach growls louder than the quill. By midday, his hands shake so violently he spills ink across a decree. He blots it, smears it, mutters a curse. He fears punishment, but none comes. Perhaps everyone is too hungry to notice. Perhaps mistakes, like hunger, have become common property. Historians find numbers in ledgers, sacks of grain imported, fines levied, riots dispersed. But numbers flatten what hunger sharpens. To read that flour rose threefold in price tells little of the ache in bones, the dizziness in the street, the child chewing bark to trick the stomach. These details survive only in scattered letters, in diaries hidden behind accounts. A merchant's wife once wrote, "I boiled my shoe to soften it, but leather does not fill the belly." That line tells more than pages of decrees. And so the escalation becomes clear. Glamour thins, appetite grows desperate, patience cracks like crust. The Republic keeps writing laws, but laws cannot feed. Bread riots break like sudden storms, then fade, leaving hunger intact. Courtesans perform, scribes copy, gondoliers row. The city moves as if normal, though every stomach knows otherwise. To laugh at this misery may seem cruel, but laughter is sometimes the only relief. A common joke spreads in those years. Venice floats on water, but sinks in soup. The soup, of course, being broth too thin to nourish. You smile because the joke is pitiful, and yet it makes the ache lighter for a heartbeat. Humor, like bread, stretches farther than it should. This is escalation, when hardship is no longer an interruption, but a constant companion, when survival itself becomes the stage, and performance the only mask left. Hunger is not glamorous, but it is honest. It reveals the city's bones, bare and unpainted.
The body can adapt to hunger. It learns to stretch meals, to chew slowly, to trick itself with hot water in place of broth. But the mind is less pliant. It is in the quiet hours, when bread crusts are gone and the city sleeps, that the true escalation unfolds. Fatigue becomes suspicion. Survival becomes compromise. The scribe feels it first. One evening, he is summoned to transcribe testimonies again. But this time, the case is not bribery, it is treason. A merchant accused of passing information to the French. The evidence is thin, mostly rumor.
Yet the air in the chamber is heavy. The magistrates glare, the accused stammers. The scribe copies every word, his quill steady, though inside his conscience writhes. He knows the outcome has been decided before the hearing began. His role is not to record truth, but to dress injustice in the robes of legality. Later, alone, he stares at the parchment, ink drying like blood. He whispers to himself, "If I do not write it, another will." It comforts him for a moment, then unravels. He realizes that is how the system survives, each person shifting responsibility to another until no one is guilty, and everyone is. For courtesans, the moral erosion takes another form. In salons, they laugh at jokes told by men they despise, nod at opinions they know are false, flatter egos that disgust them. They calculate with every word how much to concede, how much to withhold. The performance becomes a cage. Charm once felt like a tool of power, now it tastes like silence. One woman recalls a night when a senator pressed her for secrets about a rival. She knew them, everyone knew them, but to speak them aloud would be betrayal. To refuse, however, risked losing patronage. She smiled, changed the subject, poured more wine. Later, she lay awake, torn between relief and shame. Even silence, she realized, could be its own betrayal. A detail surfaces from the records. In the 1560s, a courtesan named Camilla was accused of witchcraft after refusing a powerful client. The accusation was absurd, yet it stuck long enough to ruin her. The accusation itself was the punishment. Historians argue whether such cases were common or exceptional, but the lesson is clear. One misstep, one withheld smile, and survival collapses. Fear trickles into every corner. Patrons fear exposure. Scribes fear mistakes. Courtesans fear aging or scandal. Conversations grow careful. Laughter becomes rehearsed. Even jokes carry shadows. Someone quips that pearls should be taxed by weight, not rows, and the room laughs a little too loudly, as if to disguise what is not funny at all. In these moments, trust disintegrates. A courtesan confides in another woman, only to hear her words repeated later, twisted. The scribe shares a worry with a colleague, only to see it surface in a report. Betrayal is not dramatic, not shouted in piazzas. It is whispered, shrugged, disguised as routine. The slow corrosion of trust is worse than hunger. Hunger weakens the body. Betrayal hollows the spirit. You imagine yourself at the edge of such a room. The candlelight flickers, faces blur, words float half-formed. You cannot tell if the man beside you is friend or spy. You cannot tell if your silence protects or condemns. You laugh at a joke you do not understand just to blend in. You sip watered wine though your throat is dry with unease. Survival has become indistinguishable from complicity. Academics still debate whether this atmosphere of fear was pervasive or exaggerated by later accounts. Some argue that most courtesans navigated their roles without constant dread. Others insist the threat of scandal or accusation always hovered, unspoken but sharp. The truth is likely both. Not every evening was peril, but every evening carried the potential. That is enough to fray nerves until they unravel. The scribe, finally, dreams of ink. He sees words dripping from the page, turning into chains that bind his wrists. He wakes with a start, heart racing, mouth dry. In the dream, he wanted to cry out, to tear the parchment, to spill the truth in fire. But in waking life, he picks up his quill again, steady as always. Dreams rebel where the body cannot. The courtesan, too, learns to compartmentalize. She tells herself that flattery is survival, silence is strategy,
Compromise is wisdom. Yet at night, when the city is quiet, she whispers lines of poetry not meant for anyone else. Lines that speak of honesty, of longing for a world where words do not cost so much. The poems remain hidden in drawers, in notebooks disguised as ledgers. She knows they will never be read, but they keep her human. And so escalation reaches its second stage, not starvation, not cold, but the erosion of certainty. You do not know who to trust, or even if you can trust yourself. You carry laughter like armor, silence like a blade. You live, yes, but you wonder at what cost.
The years of hunger, of silence, of compromises made in candlelit rooms, all of them gather into a storm. Every city has its breaking point, and in Venice it arrives not with a whisper, but with a crash. You are there when the city's masks slip. The day begins like any other. Bells toll, oars strike the water, merchants shout prices in the piazza. But the air is charged. A decree has been issued, another tax, another restriction, another fine levied on courtesans who dared appear too wealthy. Whispers say a group of them, bold and weary, will protest tonight. Whispers also say the Senate intends to make an example. You feel the tension settle in your bones. The evening finds you in a square lit by torches. Rain threatens, but the crowd gathers anyway. Courtesans stand at the edges, gowns damp at the hem, pearls gleaming defiantly. Their laughter is louder than usual, too sharp. The laughter of people who know they may not laugh tomorrow. Among them, Veronica Franco herself is said to be present, though cloaked. Whether it is her or someone else hardly matters. The symbol is enough. A magistrate steps forward, his robes heavy, his voice brittle. He reads the decree aloud, each syllable falling like stone. Pearls are forbidden, silks restricted, fines to be paid in silver or in shame. The words echo against the walls, amplified by silence. Then, laughter. One courtesan laughs openly, her head thrown back. Another claps as if at a play. The crowd ripples with nervous amusement. The magistrate flushes crimson. Then the soldiers move. Boots strike stone in unison, a sound louder than bells, louder than oars, louder than laughter. The air fills with the smell of torch smoke, acrid and choking. A woman screams as her pearls are torn from her neck, the strings snapping, beads scattering across the square like spilled stars. People lunge to snatch them, children diving, soldiers kicking them aside. The sound of pearls skittering on stone is sharper than any blade. The scribe is there too, quill tucked into his sleeve. He was summoned to record the decree's enforcement. He writes furiously, ink smearing as the rain begins. His hand trembles as he copies words that feel like wounds. Confiscation carried out, offenders subdued. Yet what he sees is not offenders but neighbors, not law but humiliation. He knows his account will flatten the chaos into procedure, but his memory will not. His conscience shouts, even if his quill obeys. For the courtesan in the crowd, this is the moment when pretense breaks. She has played the role of muse, of wit, of ornament. Tonight she is reduced to spectacle. A soldier shoves her, laughter fades, the crowd murmurs. She feels her gown tear at the sleeve, cold air searing her arm. She bites her tongue to keep from crying out because she knows tears will be written down as guilt. She stands straighter instead, even as her knees shake. The soundscape of the climax is unforgettable. Pearls scattering, boots stomping, torches hissing in rain, voices raised in panic and in mockery. The smell of smoke mixes with wet wool and fear. You stand in the middle of it, unable to separate the noble from the ordinary, the guilty from the innocent. Venice itself feels like it has decided to strip its masks all at once. Historians later debate whether this incident truly occurred in the form described. Some argue the records exaggerate, that only a few women were fined, that no violence stained the night. Others insist the stories of pearls shattered on stones are too consistent to ignore. Perhaps the truth is smaller, perhaps larger. But for those who stood in that square, there was no ambiguity. Their memory carried the weight of boots and broken ornaments. A small, haunting detail. One child is said to have picked up a pearl, hidden it in his mouth, and choked. Whether true or apocryphal, the story passed into rumor, repeated in taverns for decades. It became a metaphor whispered in dark corners. Greed, law, beauty, all choking in one breath. The scribe finishes his notes with hands stiff from rain. He wants to write the truth. He wants to record the laughter, the screams, the humiliation. Instead, he writes, "Order restored by nightfall." His hand shakes at the lie, but he writes it anyway. He knows another clerk would only write worse. The courtesan returns home that night, with her sleeve torn, her pearls gone, her dignity bruised but not erased. She collapses into her chair, listens to the city drip with rain, and whispers verses to herself. Verses no one will hear, verses that carry the rage and the resilience she cannot speak aloud. The words taste like defiance in her mouth, a rebellion that lives only in silence. And you, watching, realize this is the climax not because of one decree or one riot, but because masks have cracked. The Republic has revealed its teeth. Courtesans have revealed their steel. Scribes have revealed their doubts. The city has revealed its cruelty, and in doing so has also revealed its truth. The torches burn lower. The rain washes pearls into the drains. The square empties. But the memory lingers, sharper than smoke, sharper than hunger, sharper than laughter. This is the night that cannot be smoothed into parchment no matter how many decrees are copied.
The square is empty now. The torches have burned out, leaving only damp sticks and the faint smell of smoke carried by the canal wind. The stones are wet from rain, scattered with a few pearls no one bothered to collect, too small to be worth the risk of being seen bending down. In the quiet, the night feels ashamed of itself, as if the city prefers to forget what it just revealed. You return to the courtesan's chamber. Her gown lies across a chair, sleeve torn, fabric stained where wet hands grabbed. She has peeled it off and left it to crumple like a defeated flag. On the table sits a goblet of wine, untouched, surface rippling from the draught that slips through the shutters. She stares at it without drinking. Hunger still gnaws, but dignity feels hungrier. She lights a single candle and writes a few lines on scrap parchment. Not a letter, not a poem to be shared, only words for herself. They call it order. I call it theft. She folds the parchment, tucks it into a book, and closes the cover. No one may ever read it. Perhaps it will crumble to dust unnoticed. Yet writing it lets her breathe again. Words become her only refuge, her only protest. The scribe elsewhere files his record. Order restored by nightfall. The phrase stares back at him, bland and false. He imagines the magistrates nodding with satisfaction when they read it, convinced their city is intact. But he knows better. The city is cracked, not in stone but in memory. His conscience rattles like a loose shutter in the wind. He mutters a joke under his breath. If Venice ever sinks, it will be under the weight of its own lies, not water. The joke makes him laugh. bitterly alone. Morning comes, and Venice looks the same to those who choose not to see. Merchants haggle in the market, gondolas glide, children play with hoops on stone streets. Life insists on continuing. Yet small signs betray the rupture. A courtesan wears simpler clothes, not by choice but by fear. A patron speaks less freely, watching his words. A clerk copies decrees more mechanically, his thoughts wandering to last night's screams. Food arrives again in the markets, but it tastes different, not because it has changed, but because memory seasons it. Bread dipped in wine now carries the echo of pearls scattering on stone. A bowl of bean soup recalls the torches hissing in rain. Eating is no longer just sustenance, it is survival laced with remembrance. A letter survives from this period, written by a Venetian merchant. We have seen the laughter silenced. It is not pearls they fear, but voices. I wonder what kind of city grows from such soil. Historians debate whether he exaggerated or whether Venice truly entered a quieter season of repression. Some argue the courtesans continued their influence as before, others that their brilliance dimmed, shadows stretching longer across salons. The truth likely lies in the middle. Voices adjusted, but echoes remained. A haunting detail lingers. In one inventory after a courtesan's death, her possessions included a single pearl wrapped in cloth, cracked, worthless. Perhaps it was all that remained from that night, or perhaps she kept it deliberately, as a reminder of laughter turned to violence. Objects outlast moments, carrying stories silently for centuries. The courtesan herself, tired but not broken, sits at her window. She watches pigeons bob along the sill, pecking at crumbs. The city outside hums, but she feels its hollowness. She whispers verses to herself, lines about resilience disguised as love poems. If anyone overheard, they would think her sighing over a patron. In truth, she is sighing over her own survival. The scribe, too, feels the aftermath. He copies decrees by day, scratches notes into his private parchment at night. His jokes grow darker, his laughter quieter. He has stopped believing in the Republic's promises, but he continues to serve it. To refuse would mean poverty, perhaps punishment. He survives in the only way he knows, by writing truths invisible between the lines of lies. The echo of the climax is not loud. It is subtle, woven into silences, into glances, into the absence of pearls at gatherings. Venice prefers not to dwell on humiliation. It sails its ships, balances its ledgers, praises its painters. But in the quiet, you can feel it. In the taste of bread, in the scratch of quills, in the lines of poetry that never see the light. And so the aftermath lingers, not with fire, not with riots, but with silence. A silence heavier than sound, a silence that wraps around the courtesans, the scribes, the city itself.
The city exhales again, quieter now, as if embarrassed by its own outburst. Venice returns to her rituals, bells tolling, oars stirring the lagoon, vendors shouting beneath awnings. Yet beneath the surface, silence holds steady. The masks slip back into place, but once you have seen the face beneath, you never quite forget. You are in the courtesan's chamber one last time. The torn gown has been mended, the pearls replaced with glass beads that catch candlelight almost convincingly. On the table sits a goblet of wine, watered thin. Next to it, a folded scrap of parchment, the note she once wrote in defiance. They call it order, I call it theft. She runs her hand across it, not reading, only feeling the indent of ink like a scar. She does not burn it, though burning would be safer. She keeps it because memory, even when dangerous, is still hers. The scribe, elsewhere, copies decrees as always. His quill scratches through routine words, trade, tariffs, fines. He pauses only once, when he writes the name of a woman who has purchased a house with no husband listed. He smirks faintly, hides a laugh in his sleeve. In that small moment, he chooses to see resilience rather than scandal. He copies the record faithfully, but in his mind, it reads like a victory. On her shelf, the courtesan keeps one ordinary object, a pair of gloves. Not velvet, not silk, only wool lined with fur, worn smooth by years of use. When she slips her hands inside them, she feels not glamour but survival. The gloves carry the smell of smoke from countless nights, the faint trace of rose water from countless attempts to disguise fatigue. They are the truest relic of her life, not jewels, not poems, but fabric that endured. The echo of pearls scattering still lingers in the streets. Perhaps a child finds one in a crack between stones, holds it up to the sun, marvels at how something so small could once cause such noise. Perhaps he sells it to a merchant, or keeps it in a pocket, or swallows it on a dare. Objects have their own afterlives, separate from the people who wore them. Historians, centuries later, pore over decrees and letters. They argue in lecture halls whether courtesans were empowered or exploited, whether their influence was real or imagined. Some present numbers, fines, properties, inheritances. Others present poems, portraits, rumors. The debate continues, unresolved, because history does not always provide clean verdicts. What survives are fragments, pearls and drains, scraps of poetry, entries in ledgers, and from them we build stories. And you, the listener, are left with images, a chamber with a torn gown, a scribe muttering jokes over his ink, a bowl of figs wrinkled with memory, a pearl rolling across wet stone. None of these alone tell the whole story. Together they whisper of a life lived in contradictions, admired and mocked, powerful and powerless, visible and invisible. The courtesan sits by her window. Outside, the canal reflects a sky the color of ash. A gondola slides past, oar dipping with tired grace. She presses her hand to the glass and watches the ripples fade. In another life, she might have been a scholar, a merchant, a poet whose verses bore her own name. In this life, she is a courtesan, remembered mostly in margins. And yet, she has survived. Sometimes survival itself is the sharpest defiance. The scribe, elsewhere, closes his ledger, blows out his lamp, and lets the dark reclaim him. He has written lies today, as always, but he has also kept truths in his margins. Tomorrow will demand the same, and he will give it. But tonight he lets himself imagine a Venice where words mean what they say. He smiles at the foolishness of the dream and falls asleep before he can argue with himself. The city quiets. Candles gutter. The canals murmur against their stones. A pigeon coos once, then stills. In the silence, you hear not decrees, not laughter, not hunger, but the faint echo of footsteps. Hers, his, theirs, walking into history. Not triumphant, not defeated, simply present. And so the story closes, not with applause or catastrophe, but with a soft image, a pair of woolen gloves folded neatly on a table, waiting. They will never be displayed in a museum. They will never be praised in a sonnet, yet they carry more truth than jewels ever could. Now let your own room grow still. Let the candle of your mind burn low. History has spoken in whispers tonight, of pearls, of bread, of laughter real and forced. You have walked alongside courtesans and scribes, felt hunger and fatigue, heard laughter and silence. The story does not end. It only drifts into quiet, like the tide against stone. Good night.
This audio is made with Audio Toolkit for Windows Store, downloaded for free now.